Welcome to the show. I'm Doug Johnson, your host, and this is The Business of Life Strategies for Success. During each show, we try to highlight a local personality, and today's guest sure is a local Twinsburg personality. Rick Serio and I have known each other for years, and as we go way back and during our discussion, you'll hear some things that we know about one another. Today's discussion is going to be a lot of fun, but have a lot of meaning too. So Rick Serio, welcome to the show. It's so good to reconnect and be able to get back together.
Sure is, Doug, and thanks for having me.
You bet, you bet. So during your career, Rick, which has spanned a number of decades, shall we say, not that either one of us is that old,
That's
right?
right.
You have been a CPA. You've owned a very popular, fabulous restaurant in Twinsburg that people, by the way, still talk about.
We hear that once in a while.
Yeah, I bet. You've done some environmental work, and now you are the owner of a very traditional company, shall we say, that was founded in 1902, and you're carrying the torch forward and coming into this century and this decade. So first off, tell us what you're doing now, and then we'll go back and get a little bit of the backstory.
Great. So our company is AC Wellman, and there's three distinct legs of business or divisions, if you will, all emanating from the pattern industry in one way, shape, or form. So we make pattern letters for the foundry industry. So we cast in white metal mostly because it's a little flexible and can be used in casting. We also do logos. So the company, if you look on the side of an engine block, you might see a serial number, that type of thing. We make bronze and aluminum plaques. We do design and finish work and restoration of bronze and aluminum plaques. And the third piece of our business, our largest piece of business, is we manufacture X-ray markers. And sort of the first thing I get asked is, well, what's an X-ray marker? Right. So I have to go back and define, if you've ever been to an urgent care or hospital or had one of your children there and you had to have an X-ray, they might put your arm or leg on a plate, and then you might see the tech set a little square, rectangular, round, plastic or aluminum marker on the plate. It might have an R or an L and some initials. And that's to identify that it's your right arm or left arm and the initials of the person taking the X-ray. That's an overly simplistic explanation. We probably make 400 or 500 different types of markers used in various tests and all kinds of measurements in the X-ray world. So that's the biggest piece of our business, and that's the part of the business that has had the most excitement and growth in the last 4 years when I took over.
Well, I really think it's exciting that you've done that. Tell us how you got there. You started your professional life as a CPA, and you went to owning a restaurant. So tell us how that happened. Okay. I mean, obviously very different career paths.
Right. Well, I went into accounting because I understood that the numbers are business, and I always wanted to be in business, and so I went into public accounting and cut my teeth there, got the experience, and then got the opportunity to open Serio's on the Square, which we had a great adventure, great career, but it kind of ran its course. And when I left the restaurant business, I went back to accounting. I went to work for a company in Columbus. I was working there, commuting back and forth as their controller and learning. And they were an environmental company manufacturing mulches and topsoils and doing all kinds of other environmental things. So down the road, we spun off and started an environmental service company doing stormwater management. Big thing today is keeping the silt runoff out of the waterways. So we were putting crews on sites, putting filter sock, putting stormwater inlet protections, silt fence, all those things that when you see construction are there to keep the waterways clean. So we worked that business for several years, and it was very successful. But for me, the success was not fulfilling. I mean, I was doing a good job, I was enjoying it, but it wasn't mine. And when you're an entrepreneur, it just never, you just don't put that out like a light switch. So I started looking for an opportunity to get back into business. And ironically, I probably looked at 200 companies. Ironically, AC Wellman was the first company I looked at. And I kept my list of the things that I wanted and the things that I didn't want, and I kept coming back to Allcraft Wellman, which was the name at the time. And so eventually I was able to meet the previous owner, Gil Wellman, and we hit it off. We worked through all the numbers and everything else, but there was a lot to learn. There was a lot of aspects to that business that I knew nothing about. My background was in more of an accounting consulting role, so learning a new industry was very challenging and very exciting, but I didn't know it yet. So the deal I made with Gil was that he would stick around for a year, a couple days a week, and be part of our management team and help me to transition into the ownership role. And not ironically, I speak to Gil very regularly, and I just had a conversation with him on Friday. Mm-hmm. It's been great having someone with that much knowledge. His great-grandfather started the business, and we've maintained that relationship, and it's been very rewarding for me.
That's really neat. And as you say, you really don't know what you don't know. So smart move. Rick, I want to go back to the restaurant for a little bit because so many people know you from that venue, and talk about your philosophy a little bit, owning a restaurant. And I know one of the things that always impressed Mary and me when we were in there was the fact that you came out and you talked with, not to or at, mm-hmm. you talked with the customers. And so many people, I still hear around town, you know, when I was in there, Rick would come around mm-hmm. to the table and he would talk with me. Mm-hmm. That was so important. Mm-hmm. And knowing that you did that in the restaurant, how does that move over to your work at AC Wellman?
Well, that's part of my personality. In fact, if you walked in the restaurant, you saw the kitchen was wide open. That was a must because that's how I could connect with our customers. I looked forward more than anything to coming out to see if we did everything right, and if we didn't, what can we be better at? Always wanting to give credit to the guys in the kitchen. But I loved talking with people. I loved being a part of the community. It was a part of the business that's the most fun, but the least amount of time you get to do is to be out, you know, doing that. But that was the essence of a small family restaurant. But those same tenets, they transfer to everything that I do in life. In our business, we're a manufacturer. We don't get many people walk through the front door, but our people, the people that work in our building, you know, we communicate constantly. I need to understand what they're doing. I want them to understand what I'm doing, mm-hmm. and most importantly, I want their feedback. We don't get better in that building because of me. Sometimes I tell them we get better in spite of me. My job is to challenge them to bring out the best. Bring me your creative side. Take a risk. Let's try something new. We have to be constantly in improvement mode. And if we're not, then we're getting stale. So that communication is essential. I ask about their families. I ask about what they're doing. I ask what they like about what they're doing. How can we do it better? And we get good feedback because of that.
Well, and it's so important because you're engaging with them, makes them feel important and valuable, and obviously helps the company,
right? Which
translate to the bottom line.
Of course. Well, they are important. I mean, to your point, they are very important. Nothing gets done without the team. We are a team. Everyone's got a role to play. My role is no more or less important than theirs if they're not executing, if I'm not executing. So it's very much a team environment.
Well, and I would say all capital letters, A-N-D, and it promotes the feeling of family. And in today's society, that is so very important, you know, to feel wanted, to feel a part of something. And I have the feeling that we're losing that a lot with the focus on computers and someone can be in a cubicle next to yours, and how do you communicate? Well, you text them.
Yeah.
Stand up and talk over the cubicle barrier.
Right.
And we're losing that in a number of cases. And that's really concerning to me as a member of society, but put aside.
Yeah.
So you're a serial entrepreneur. At one point, you and I worked on starting a root beer company, if you remember.
We sure did.
And maybe we should get back to that at some point.
I think there's always an opportunity for another great product in the marketplace.
Right, for sure.
Yeah.
That was great fun, and certainly some great discussions over that. In talking about your backstory and getting from CPA to AC Wellman, those careers are so different, so varied. What connects them all?
Well, the thing from my perspective that connects everything that we do is the numbers. Now, I'm not wearing a visor focused on the numbers, but everything we do translates to numbers. That's the language of business. So the CPA time was about learning the broadness of business, the specifics of the financial side of business, but how every line item, every item in that financial statement translates to an operation within business. And if you're not understanding that and focused on how operationally we must be focused on the numbers too, you lose the ability to manage the business. Not to say that that's the only thing that matters. Operationally, we have to get our team involved. I help them understand my challenges with numbers. They help me understand their challenges with the practical side of doing their job. And then we put our thinking caps on and we're able to say, how do we bring efficiency to profitability and improve the work environment? And that's a simple sentence, but it's a difficult process. But that's where we stay focused.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit, Rick, about your feelings, and we'll talk about this a little bit later when we get into your strategies for success, because you came at this from a little different direction. And you have 3 kids, mm-hmm. all grown now, mm-hmm. and I remember them when they were, just real little. And in their upbringing, and I know that this was part of your thought process for your strategies of success, you felt that if your children could be successful and you could help them be successful with these strategies for success, that is kind of a different take, mm-hmm. but certainly applicable. So talk about why you decided that, and then we'll get into the strategies.
Got it. Well, I grew up, my parents are, my mom is still with us, but my dad is gone, but they were immigrants from Sicily. And they grew up wondering where the next meal was going to come from, not what they were going to watch, what video they were going to play, who they were texting. It was a different mindset. They had a survival mindset. So when we were growing up, we were taught how to survive, how to take those survival lessons and use them in every aspect of life. The values you set for your children, the values you set for yourself, your work ethic. The thought of quitting a job and not giving notice, no matter what the circumstances were. I didn't have the guts to face my father if I pulled a stunt like that, okay? Regardless of who was right or wrong, you did the respectful thing. Respect, respect, respect. It was a tenet of our upbringing. So when I got older and started a family, I realized that what my father and mother taught me were the tenets of life, not just business. And so I realized if we don't impart these things on our children, they're not going to stand a chance. And so I tried to incorporate all of that value system in everything that they learned and everything I applied to work. And so they're not that different. Maybe you apply certain things a little differently, but the value systems that you can impart through those same lessons, they're not that different.
Well, and as you and I discussed, you're talking family here and children, but those same tenets are applicable to the business world.
Absolutely.
and how one treats their employees and how employees should expect to be treated. And that takes us back, and you and I have had this discussion about the participation trophies.
Oh, yeah.
And how we feel about that. And I think we agree about that.
Absolutely. Very quick story. I was bringing my son home from the end of baseball season, and he had gotten his participation trophy and saw so much value in this trophy. So I asked him, I says, what did you do to earn that trophy? He said, well, I was just on the team. I said, yeah, but you didn't do anything specifically to earn that. I said, in contrast, Nick, that they gave you that because I paid a fee for you to join baseball. In contrast to that, you got a soccer trophy in your room from winning a tournament. That trophy has value. You accomplished something. You won something. You earned that reward. This is just a gift. It's not a trophy, and you shouldn't think of it as that. And later that afternoon, I found all his participation trophies in the recycle bin. So, lesson learned.
Lesson learned.
Right.
That's a really neat story. How do you think we can start to incorporate that into today's society?
I think the first thing we need to do is not punish people because they want to win. This concept that it doesn't matter who won is absurd. When was the last time you didn't win a contract and were able to pay your bills with that loss?
Right.
Life is about winning. How you win, how you treat people in the process, in the competition, is every bit as important. Be a gracious winner and a gracious loser. Learn from it, move forward. The most learning I've done is when I've made the biggest mistakes. If you lose, if you don't measure who wins or loses, where's the learning? All we've done is learn that it doesn't matter how I perform, I'm going to win anyway. That's not life. It's not the life I live. It's not the life any of my contemporaries live. We have to go out and compete. We compete in the world. There's no such thing as a free ride. So I think we need to go back to sportsmanship. I think we need to teach a value system there, but we need to teach competition. Competition is good and it's healthy.
Well, and I think one of the words that you used before, respect, is right at the top of that list.
Absolutely.
And kind of drives everything.
Absolutely.
And when we talk about respect, of course, I think of Aretha Franklin, R-E-S-P-C-E-C-T, right?
Right, exactly.
And so I think that is a driver of everything. So, Rick, let's talk about your 3 strategies for success. You have said, give your children everything they need and some of what they want.
Right, exactly.
What does that mean?
Well, to me, it's very simple. If you take away a child's drive, they never learn to be motivated to achieve anything. If I give you everything you ask me for, what's the sense of learning how to drive myself? And so our philosophy at home with Denise and myself was always give them what they need: security, food, shelter, clothing, the necessities. Give them some of what they want: a birthday gift, a Christmas gift. But when it's time to get something extra, how are you going to earn that? I'll invest with you. What are you going to do to earn that? So that it's not a gift anymore. They did it on their own. My children earned their own education. We helped. They earned some scholarships. They took some loans. It's their education, and nobody can ever take that from them. There seems to be this shame in making your kids earn things, and to me, they literally don't learn how to be driven if they want for nothing.
Mm-hmm. So let me go back here for a minute because it's interesting. Did your kids get allowances?
I allowed them to live in the house. I allowed them to be driven where they needed to go. We didn't pay allowance. They contributed to the house and we helped them. But as soon as they got old enough to want, they started helping. They would come to the restaurant and help me. I had a catering job off-site. They'd come and help me. And they learned how to earn their way, not to allow their way. And that was a quote from a famous TV show that I loved to watch because it was all about that. But it's another story.
It's interesting. I wonder if that's generational, because we got paid an allowance based on the chores that we did around the house.
Right.
So washing dishes, not putting them in the dishwasher, washing and drying dishes was maybe, back in my time, was maybe 10 cents a week.
Yeah, right.
Bringing the garbage out was whatever. And it's interesting that so many kids today that we know, the parents are still taking out the garbage and putting the dishes in the dishwasher.
Right.
Because they've upgraded. But
right, exactly.
The kids are at home playing on their computers and texting.
We got our kids a dog when they were younger. They were insistent on having this dog. They worked me over, and I finally capitulated because I didn't want a dog. Denise was all for it. So I made a deal with our 3 kids. This is not my dog. This is your dog, and everything about this dog falls on you guys, not me. I can remember one night it was snowing like crazy out, and the kids were fighting over whose turn it was to take the dog out. Mm-hmm. Like, well, I know whose turn it is, but I'm going to let you guys fight it out. If you can't determine who it is, then I'll step in, which of course nobody would admit it. So I made all 3 of them get dressed, put their boots on, and take the dog out. After that, they figured out how to manage their own responsibilities.
Right.
I had a good laugh, by the way.
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet. Second strategy: teach your children how to reach inside for more when they are young and soft.
Right. So when I say soft, I mean they're resilient, okay? When a kid gets stressed as a young kid, they learn how to handle stress. If a kid's put in a cocoon his whole life, he becomes an adult, and the first time they get yelled at work, they don't know how to function because they've never dealt with being a disappointer. So our philosophy was teach them how to go get more. I used to get asked all the time, how much is enough studying? I said, well, when you know the material, you've studied enough. When you've learned to reach in and go get what you need to be your very best, then you've done that and you've got that. Now you know where the reserve tank is. If you don't push your kids to find that reserve tank, they won't find it in college, they'll give up. And so we pushed our children to find that reserve, to always look deeper, always put an extra hour in, always think about something a little bit more, never give up. We lose when we give up. If we never quit, we never lose. We might have disappointment, we might have a more difficult road, but we never lose if we don't quit. And that's, to me, the philosophy behind that. And I use that tenet at work. Don't quit because we can't figure it out. There's got to be a solution. Let's talk about it. Let's look at it from this angle. Let's move where we're sitting and look at it from that angle. And eventually, we come up with solutions. It's not different.
I think the term that you mentioned, cocooning, today, I have clients who have called me and said, so how do I handle a parent, number one, who calls for an interview, and or more recently, how do I handle a parent that calls me because they want to sit in on a child's performance evaluation interview? And my response to that person is, the parent is not the employee, the child is. If the child chooses to share after the fact, fine.
Right.
But they are not to sit in on the interview. That's between you and the person.
Yeah.
So, in just interesting times. The third strategy for success, Rick, is make certain that your children align their life goals with their support goals. What do you mean by that?
So, too many times, and my kids were no different. I want to be this when I grow up. And then in a different sentence, I want to have this and I want to have that. I said, well, those 2 goals are not aligned. If this thing that you want to do pays X, and this thing you want out of life pays Y, or you want the leisure time and X doesn't give that, well, then you're not aligned. So, we pushed our children to align their goals. I'm not going to tell you what you can and cannot do, but you have to align these things. And one of my children, she was not aligned. She was going to go do this, and it wasn't going to give her what she wanted. And I told her, I says, I'm not sold on your plan. I'm not investing. So if you want to go to college for that, you're on your own. If you want to get a good plan B that gives you the extra tools to go be more successful, I'm investing for the longer term. But you got to align those things. Otherwise, these kids get into the real world and they're disappointed. Well, I never expected that I'd have to work nights and weekends. Well, did you understand the career path you were taking? Or I want to be able to go on vacation and not be bothered. Well, did you understand that being in management somehow sometimes negates that? So you have to think those things through. And again, that's today's workforce. If they're taught that growing up, they're more prepared for what life really is about.
Rick, it's been great. We have to leave it there. Thank you so much. And it's really great to reconnect.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Doug. Thanks again.
So my wife and I went to the movies yesterday. Haven't been for quite a while. And we saw an absolutely phenomenal movie called Respect. Highly recommended, but I digress. We got there, bought our ticket, and were asked to assign ourselves to our seats on an electronic pad. We did that expecting, because we had to make reservations for ourselves, a crowded theater. Know how many people were there? 9. So what do you think? A waste of time and effort for all the movie theaters?